The widow stood in the middle of Main Street in Virginia City, Nevada, with her 3 children clinging to her dusty skirts, watching the stranger ride into town on a horse so black it seemed to drink in the desert sun. Grant Brennan had been in the saddle for 6 weeks straight, chasing rumors of ranch work and a fresh start, and the last thing he expected to find was a woman whose eyes held both steel and sorrow in equal measure. She was hauling water from the well, her arms straining with the weight of 2 wooden buckets while trying to keep track of the children who darted around her like anxious sparrows. The oldest, a girl of maybe 10 years, noticed him first and tugged at her mother's sleeve. The woman looked up, brushing a strand of dark hair from her face with the back of her hand, and their gazes locked for just a moment before she turned away. Grant dismounted and led his horse toward the livery stable, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. Virginia City was bustling despite the late afternoon heat, miners and merchants conducting their business with the urgency of men who knew fortunes could vanish as quickly as they appeared. The Comstock lode had made this place rich beyond imagination just a few years back in 1859, and now in the summer of 1873, the silver vein still ran deep enough to keep hope alive. "Help you with something?" The livery owner, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained teeth, squinted at Grant from beneath his hat. "Looking for work," Grant said, patting his horse's neck. "Ranch work, preferably. Know anyone hiring?" The man spat into the dirt. "Might be the Sullivan Ranch needs hands." "About 5 miles west of here. Old man Sullivan passed 3 months back. Heart gave out. His widow is trying to keep the place running, but it is not easy work for a woman alone." Grant nodded his thanks and paid for his horse's keep before heading toward the saloon. He needed a drink and information in that order. The Silver Dollar Saloon was dimly lit and smelled of whiskey and unwashed bodies, but it was cooler than the street, and that counted for something. He was on his 2nd whiskey when he heard the commotion outside. Through the dusty window, he could see the same woman from earlier, this time arguing with a well-dressed man in a black suit. The 3 children stood behind her, the oldest girl holding the 2 younger ones close. Grant found himself moving toward the door without conscious thought. As he stepped outside, he heard the man's raised voice. "You owe the bank 3 months, Mrs. Sullivan. We have been patient, but patience has its limits. You have until the end of the month to make good on the loan, or we will be forced to foreclose on the property." "I told you, Mr. Hartley, the cattle are ready for market. I just need 2 more weeks to drive them to Carson City." The woman's voice was steady, but Grant could hear the tremor beneath it. "The money from that sale will cover what I owe and then some." 2 weeks, 2 months, it makes no difference. The terms were clear. End of August or you lose the ranch. Hartley tipped his hat with exaggerated politeness. "Good day, Mrs. Sullivan." The woman watched him walk away, her shoulders rigid with barely contained fury. The little girl tugged at her hand. "Mama, what is he talking about? Nothing for you to worry about, Sarah." She smoothed the child's hair with a tenderness that made Grant's chest ache. "Come on, we need to get home before dark." Grant stepped forward before he could talk himself out of it. "Excuse me, madam. I could not help but overhear. I am looking for ranch work. Name is Grant Brennan." She turned to face him fully for the first time, and he was struck by how young she was beneath the worry lines. Mid-20s, he guessed, with green eyes that assessed him with the wariness of someone who had learned not to trust too easily. "Joanna Sullivan," she said after a long moment. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Brennan, but I cannot afford to pay hired hands right now. As you just heard, money is somewhat tight." "I heard," he acknowledged. "What if we worked out a different arrangement? I help you get those cattle to market, help around the ranch, and you provide food and a place to sleep. Once the cattle sell, we can discuss wages." She studied him with those sharp green eyes. "Why would you do that? You do not know me or anything about my situation." Grant shifted his weight, suddenly feeling exposed under her scrutiny. "Let us just say I know what it is like to need help and not have anywhere to turn. Consider it paying forward a kindness someone once showed me." One of the younger children, a boy of maybe 6 or 7, peeked out from behind Joanna's skirts. "Are you a real cowboy?" Despite the tension, Grant smiled. "I suppose I am, son. Been working cattle since I was not much older than you." "This is my daughter, Sarah," Joanna said, gesturing to the oldest girl. "And these are my boys, Thomas and James. They are twins." The two younger children were indeed identical, with the same light brown hair and freckled noses. "If you are serious about this offer, Mr. Brennan, I would be a fool to turn it down. But I want to be clear about something from the start." She straightened her spine and looked him dead in the eye. "I come with 3 children. This is not just about helping out on a ranch. These are my babies and they come first always. If that is a problem, best we part ways now." Grant met her gaze without flinching. "Madam, I would not have it any other way. Children deserve to be put first." Something in her expression softened just slightly. "All right then. We have a wagon around back of the general store. You can follow us out to the ranch." The Sullivan Ranch was modest but well maintained, with a sturdy house, a barn that had seen better days, and corrals that stretched toward the hills. As they approached, Grant could see why Joanna was desperate to save it. The land was good, with water from a creek that ran along the western edge and enough grazing to support a decent herd. "My husband built most of this with his own hands," Joanna said as she climbed down from the wagon. "Robert and I came out here 7 years ago from Ohio. He had a dream of making something that would last, something to pass down to our children." Grant helped the children down, noting how Sarah immediately took charge of her brothers, leading them toward the house with practiced efficiency. "How long has he been gone?" 3 months and 4 days. Joanna's voice was flat, carefully controlled. "Heart attack. He was working on fixing the barn roof and just collapsed. Sarah found him." She swallowed hard. "I should show you where you will be staying. We have a small bunkhouse around back. It is not much, but it is clean." The bunkhouse was indeed small, barely large enough for a bed and a trunk, but it was more than Grant had expected. "This will do fine, thank you." Over the next few days, Grant threw himself into the work of the ranch. The cattle needed to be rounded up from where they had scattered across the grazing land. Fences needed mending, and the barn roof still had the hole that Robert Sullivan had died trying to fix. Grant worked from sunup to sundown, and Joanna matched him hour for hour, driving herself with a determination that bordered on reckless. On the 3rd evening, he found her in the barn trying to lift a bag of feed that probably weighed more than she did. He took it from her hands without a word and carried it to the storage room. "I can handle it," she said, her pride evident in every syllable. "I know you can," Grant replied, "but you do not have to. That is why I am here." She sagged against the barn wall, exhaustion finally showing through. "I am sorry. I am not used to accepting help. Robert and I did everything ourselves for so long." "Tell me about him," Grant said, settling onto a hay bale. "If you want to, that is." Joanna was quiet for so long he thought she would not answer. Then she began to speak, slowly at first, then with increasing ease. She told him about meeting Robert at a church social in Cincinnati, how he had been so full of dreams and ambition, how they had married quickly and headed west with nothing but hope and determination. She talked about the early years, the struggle to establish the ranch, the joy when Sarah was born, followed 2 years later by the twins. "He was a good man," she said finally. "Not perfect, but good. He loved the children more than anything. I think that is what I miss most, watching him with them. The way Thomas would follow him around like a shadow, or how James would climb into his lap every evening and fall asleep. And Sarah, she was his little princess. He taught her to ride before she could properly walk. Grant listened without interrupting, understanding that she needed to talk to remember to grieve. When she finally fell silent, he said quietly, "They are lucky to have had him, and they are lucky to have you." She looked at him with surprise, as if the thought had never occurred to her. "Thank you, Mr. Brennan." "Grant," he corrected. "If we are going to be working together like this, might as well use first names." "Joanna," she offered with a small smile. "Though the children call me Mama, obviously." The roundup took 2 weeks of hard, dawn to dusk work. Grant was impressed by Joanna's skill with a horse and rope. She rode like she had been born in the saddle, fearless and competent. Sarah often came along, helping where she could and watching over her brothers when they insisted on tagging along. It was during one of these long days that Grant really started to notice things. The way Joanna's face lit up when she laughed at something Thomas said. How she always made sure the children ate before she did. The protective way she watched over them, like a she-wolf guarding her cubs. And he noticed how she sometimes caught him watching and would look away quickly, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. He told himself it was just appreciation for a hard-working woman, respect for her dedication to her children and her ranch. But late at night, lying in his bunk and listening to the coyotes howl, he knew it was becoming something more. One evening, about 3 weeks after his arrival, Grant was helping Sarah with her reading while Joanna prepared supper. The twins were playing with wooden horses Robert had carved for them, and the scene was so domestic, so peaceful, that Grant felt something shift in his chest. "Mr. Grant, what does this word mean?" Sarah pointed to a passage in her McGuffey reader. "Perseverance," Grant read. "It means to keep going even when things are hard, to not give up." Sarah considered this seriously. "Like Mama, she has perseverance." "She certainly does," Grant agreed, glancing toward the kitchen where Joanna was stirring something on the stove. "Your Mama is one of the strongest people I have ever met. Do you like her?" Sarah asked with the blunt curiosity of a child. Grant felt heat creep up his neck. "Of course I like her. I like all of you." "No, I mean, do you like her like Papa liked her?" "Because she smiles more now than she did before you came, and she does not cry at night as much." The thought of Joanna crying alone in her room while her children slept made Grant's heart constrict. "Your Mama has been through a lot. It is natural for her to be sad sometimes." "I know," Sarah said solemnly. "I miss Papa too, but I think he would be happy that you are helping us. He always said that good men help people who need it." Before Grant could respond, Joanna called them to supper. The meal was simple but filling, beef stew and cornbread with butter. As they ate, the twins chattered about everything and nothing, their childish voices filling the small house with life and warmth. After the children were put to bed, Grant helped Joanna clean up. They worked in companionable silence, and Grant was acutely aware of every time their hands brushed while passing dishes. "The cattle are ready," Joanna said as she dried the last plate. "We can start the drive to Carson City tomorrow if the weather holds." "About that," Grant said carefully. "It is going to be a hard drive with just the two of us, and we cannot leave the children here alone." Joanna bit her lip. "I know. I have been trying to figure it out. Maybe I could ask Mrs. Henderson in town to watch them, but she has her own family and I hate to impose." "What if they came with us?" Grant suggested. "Sarah is old enough to help with the camp and the boys could ride in the wagon. It would not be easy, but families did it all the time on the wagon trains west." "It would be safer to have them where I can see them," Joanna admitted. "And Sarah would enjoy it. She has been begging to go on a real cattle drive since she was 5 years old." The next morning dawned clear and bright. They loaded the wagon with supplies and set out with 40 head of cattle, driving them west toward Carson City. It was slow going with the children along, but Grant found himself enjoying it more than any drive he had ever been on. Sarah proved herself a capable hand, riding alongside Grant and helping keep the cattle moving. The twins rode in the wagon with their mother, occasionally calling out when they spotted a stray. They camped under the stars that first night, and Grant taught Thomas and James how to identify different constellations while Joanna prepared supper over the campfire. "There is the Big Dipper," he pointed out, "and if you follow those 2 stars at the end, they point right to Polaris, the North Star. Sailors and travelers have been using it to navigate for thousands of years." "How do you know so much about stars?" Thomas asked, his eyes wide with wonder. "My father taught me," Grant said, the memory bringing a mix of warmth and sadness. "He was a farmer back in Tennessee. We would sit outside on summer nights and he would tell me all the old stories about the constellations." "Where is he now?" James asked. "He died during the war," Grant said quietly. "A lot of good men died in that war." Joanna looked up from the fire, her expression sympathetic. "I am sorry. That must have been hard." "It was a long time ago," Grant said, though the pain never really went away. "I was 18 when Fort Sumter was fired upon. Joined up with the Union Army a month later. Spent 4 years fighting, then another few years drifting, trying to figure out who I was without the war defining me." "Is that why you travel so much?" Sarah asked. "Because you are still figuring it out," Grant smiled at her perceptiveness. "Maybe so. Or maybe I just had not found a good enough reason to stop traveling. Until now." He did not mean to say that last part out loud, but once the words were spoken, he could not take them back. Joanna's eyes met his across the fire, and something unspoken passed between them. The second day of the drive brought challenges. A group of cattle broke away, spooked by a rattlesnake, and it took Grant and Sarah an hour to round them back up. Then one of the wagon wheels hit a rock and cracked, requiring repairs that cost them half the afternoon. By the time they made camp that evening, everyone was exhausted and irritable. "I hate this," Thomas complained, his lower lip trembling. "I want to go home." "We will be home soon enough," Joanna soothed, though Grant could see the worry in her eyes. They were behind schedule, and every delay meant more risk that they would not make it to Carson City in time. "Tell you what," Grant said, crouching down to the boy's level. "How about tomorrow you ride up on my horse with me for a while? You can help me scout ahead. That is an important job, and I need someone brave to help me do it." Thomas perked up immediately. "Really? I can ride with you, if your mama says it is all right." Joanna hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but you hold on tight, you hear me?" The next day, true to his word, Grant lifted Thomas up onto his horse and let the boy sit in front of him in the saddle. They rode ahead of the herd, and Grant pointed out animal tracks and explained how to read the land for water and danger. "You are really good at this," Thomas observed. "Being a cowboy, I mean." "It is what I know," Grant said, "but there is a lot more to life than just cattle and horses." "Like what?" "Like family," Grant said, surprising himself with the answer. "Like having people who matter to you and who you matter to. That is what makes a place a home." That evening, after the children were asleep, Grant and Joanna sat by the fire drinking coffee. The night was clear and cool, a welcome relief from the day's heat. "Thank you for being patient with them," Joanna said. "Especially the boys. They have not had a man's attention since Robert died. I can see how much it means to them." "They are good kids," Grant said. "All 3 of them. You have done an amazing job raising them." "I had help for most of it," she said softly. "I do not know if I am doing it right on my own." "You are doing better than right," Grant assured her. "They are healthy, happy, and they know they are loved. That is what matters most." Joanna was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Sure." "Why have you never settled down? Never married?" Grant took a sip of his coffee, considering his answer. "I guess I never found the right woman, or maybe I never thought I deserved that kind of happiness. After the war, I saw so much death, so much suffering. It changed something in me, made me feel like I did not have the right to build a normal life when so many good men never got that chance." "That is not fair to yourself," Joanna said gently. "You survived for a reason. You deserve happiness just as much as anyone else." "Maybe," Grant said. "Or maybe I was just waiting to find something worth staying for." Their eyes met again, and this time neither looked away. The air between them seemed charged with possibility, with all the words neither of them quite dared to speak. "Grant, Joanna began, but whatever she was about to say was interrupted by Sarah calling out from the wagon, "Mama, James is having a bad dream." The moment broken, Joanna hurried to comfort her son, leaving Grant alone with his thoughts and the realization that he was falling in love with a woman who might not be ready to love again. They reached Carson City on the afternoon of the fourth day, dusty and tired, but with all 40 head of cattle accounted for. Grant helped Joanna negotiate with the buyer, a shrewd businessman who tried to lowball them, until Grant pointed out the quality of the stock and mentioned that there were other buyers in town who might appreciate such fine animals. In the end, they got a fair price, more than enough to pay off the bank and keep the ranch running for another year. Joanna counted the money 3 times as if she could not quite believe it was real. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." "You did it," Grant corrected. "I just helped." "No," she said firmly, looking up at him with shining eyes. "We did it together. I could not have managed this without you, Grant. I need you to know that." They stayed in Carson City that night, getting rooms at a modest hotel so the children could have real beds and hot baths. Grant used some of his savings to buy the boys peppermint sticks and a new hair ribbon for Sarah, who blushed with pleasure when he presented it to her. "You did not have to do that," Joanna protested, though she was smiling. "I wanted to," Grant said simply. "They worked hard. They deserve a reward." That evening, after the children were asleep in one room, Grant and Joanna sat in the hotel restaurant sharing a meal. It was the first time they had been truly alone together, without children or cattle or work demanding their attention. "What will you do now?" Joanna asked, pushing food around her plate. "Now that the job is done, I mean. Will you move on to the next ranch, the next opportunity?" Grant had been dreading this question because he did not know how to answer it honestly without revealing too much. "I have been thinking about that," he said carefully. "The truth is, I am not sure I want to move on." Joanna's hand stilled. "What do you mean?" "I mean that these past few weeks have been the happiest I have been in a long time, maybe ever." Grant took a deep breath, knowing he was about to lay his heart on the table and risk having it broken. "I know it is fast, and I know the timing might not be right, but I cannot leave without being honest with you about how I feel." "Grant, let me finish, please," he said gently. "Joanna, you are one of the strongest, most capable women I have ever met. You are a wonderful mother, a skilled rancher, and when you smile, it is like the sun coming out after a storm. And your children, they have worked their way into my heart in a way I never expected. I know I am just a drifter, a cowboy with nothing to offer but a willingness to work hard and a heart that is completely yours if you want it." He reached across the table and took her hand, feeling it tremble in his. "I am not asking you to decide anything right now. I know you are still grieving Robert, and I respect that. But I needed you to know that I have fallen in love with you, Joanna Sullivan. And if you will have me, I would be honored to stay and help you build a life, to be a father to those 3 beautiful children, to wake up every morning and know that I have a purpose beyond just surviving." Tears were streaming down Joanna's face, and for a terrible moment, Grant thought he had made a horrible mistake. Then she squeezed his hand and said in a voice thick with emotion, "I have been so scared of feeling this way. Robert has only been gone 3 months. What kind of wife does it make me that I have feelings for another man so soon?" "It makes you human," Grant said firmly. "Love does not follow a schedule or a set of rules. Your heart knows what it needs." "I need to think," Joanna said. "This is not just about me. I have 3 children to consider. If I let you into our lives and it does not work out, it would break their hearts. It would break my heart." "I understand," Grant said, though his chest felt tight with fear that she might choose safety over the risk of loving again. "Take all the time you need. I will be at the ranch for as long as you want me there." They rode back to Virginia City the next day in relative silence, though it was not uncomfortable. The children chattered away, unaware of the emotional undercurrent flowing between the adults. When they arrived at the ranch, Joanna asked Grant to come to the house after he had settled the horses. He found her in the kitchen, looking out the window at the setting sun. The children were playing outside, their laughter drifting through the open door. "I have been thinking," Joanna said without preamble. "Actually, I have been thinking of little else since last night." Grant waited, his heart pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. "Robert and I had a good marriage, not perfect but good. He was my best friend, the father of my children, and I will always love him for that. But he is gone, and I am still here, and these children need more than just a mother trying to do everything alone. They need stability, security, and yes, they need a father figure." She turned to face him, her green eyes bright with unshed tears and something else, something that looked like hope. "But more than that, I need you to understand something. If I say yes to this, it is not just because you are convenient or because I need help with the ranch. It is because when I look at you, I see a man of integrity and kindness. It is because my heart beats faster when you walk into a room. It is because I have caught myself imagining what it would be like to build a future with you." Grant crossed the room in 3 strides and took her hands in his. "Joanna, are you saying?" "I am saying yes," she interrupted, a tremulous smile crossing her face. "I am saying that life is too short and too uncertain to let fear keep us from happiness. I am saying that I want you to stay, Grant Brennan. Not as a hired hand or even as a friend, but as my husband, if you are still asking." "I am asking," Grant said, his voice rough with emotion. "I will ask every day for the rest of my life if that is what it takes." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, gently at first, then with all the pent-up longing of the past weeks. She kissed him back with equal fervor, her arms wrapping around his neck as if she never wanted to let go. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, they heard giggling from the doorway. All 3 children stood there, Sarah with a knowing smile, the twins with confusion written all over their faces. "Does this mean Mr. Grant is going to be our new papa?" James asked. Joanna looked at Grant and he nodded encouragingly. "Would that be all right with you children?" she asked. Sarah's smile widened. "I think Papa would approve. He always said family was not just about blood, but about love and commitment." Thomas and James looked at each other, some silent twin communication passing between them. Then Thomas said, "Can we still call him Mr. Grant? Papa will always be Papa." "You can call me whatever feels right to you," Grant said, crouching down to their level. "I am not trying to replace your father. Nobody could do that. But I promise to love you and your mama with everything I have and to always do my best by all of you." James walked over and wrapped his small arms around Grant's neck. "I think you will be a good almost papa." The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the small church in Virginia City. It was a simple ceremony, with just a few neighbors and friends in attendance. Joanna wore a blue dress that brought out her eyes, and Grant wore his best suit, carefully brushed and pressed for the occasion. Sarah stood beside her mother as a sort of junior bridesmaid, beaming with pride. The twins served as ring bearers, though James nearly dropped the rings and Thomas had to be reminded twice not to run down the aisle. The whole thing was slightly chaotic and absolutely perfect. Reverend Matthews, a kindly old man who had buried Robert Sullivan just 3 months earlier, spoke about love and second chances, about how God sometimes brings people together in unexpected ways. When it came time for Grant to say his vows, he looked directly into Joanna's eyes and spoke from the heart. "Joanna, I promise to honor you and cherish you for all the days of my life. I promise to be a good husband to you and a good father to Sarah, Thomas, and James. I promise to work hard to build the life you and Robert dreamed of and to make new dreams with you. I promise to love you with everything I am and everything I have." Joanna's vows were equally heartfelt. "Grant, you came into our lives when we needed you most, and you stayed when it would have been easier to leave. You have shown me that it is possible to love again, to hope again, to believe in the future. I promise to be your partner in all things, to support you and encourage you, and to build a home filled with love and laughter. I promise to love you for all my days." When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, Grant kissed his bride to the sound of applause and the twins making exaggerated gagging noises that made everyone laugh. The reception was held at the ranch, with neighbors bringing food and well wishes. Mrs. Henderson, the kind woman from town, had made a beautiful cake that the children eyed with unconcealed longing. There was music and dancing, and Grant found himself swept up in the celebration, his heart so full he thought it might burst. As the sun began to set and the guests started to leave, Grant stood on the porch with his new family, watching the golden light paint the hills. Joanna leaned against his side, her head on his shoulder, while the children chased fireflies in the yard. "Happy?" she asked softly. "More than I knew was possible," Grant answered honestly. "This right here, this is what I have been searching for all these years without knowing it." "I am glad you found us," Joanna said, "or that we found you, however it works." "So am I," Grant said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "So am I." The first months of their marriage brought adjustments and challenges, but also immense joy. Grant threw himself into improving the ranch, fixing the barn roof that had claimed Robert's life, mending fences, and planning for the spring calving season. Joanna proved to be not just a partner in the ranch work, but in every aspect of life. They fell into easy rhythms, working side by side during the day and falling into each other's arms at night. Grant had never known such intimacy, such complete sharing of lives and hearts. There were moments when the weight of responsibility pressed down on him, when he worried he was not doing enough, not being enough for this ready-made family. But Joanna always seemed to sense his doubts, and would remind him with words or touches or simply her presence that he was exactly where he belonged. The children adjusted remarkably well. Sarah, wise beyond her years, told Grant one evening that he made her mother happy, and that was all that mattered to her. The twins took longer to warm up completely, still missing their father acutely at times, but gradually they began to seek Grant out for help with homework, for advice on childhood problems, for the kind of rough and tumble play that only a father figure could provide. There was one difficult moment about 2 months into the marriage when Thomas had a nightmare and called out for his papa in the night. Grant, still adjusting to being woken by children's needs, went to comfort him, only to have the boy push him away. "You are not my papa," Thomas sobbed. "I want my real papa." The words stung, but Grant understood. He sat on the edge of the bed and said gently, "You are right. I am not your papa, and I never will be. Your papa was a brave, good man who loved you very much. It is okay to miss him. It is okay to be sad. And it is okay if you never think of me as your papa. I am just here to help, to be someone you can count on." Joanna appeared in the doorway, having heard the commotion, but Grant shook his head slightly and she stayed back, letting him handle it. Thomas sniffled and wiped his nose on his sleeve. "Do you promise you will not leave like Papa did?" "Your papa did not want to leave," Grant said carefully. "Sometimes things happen that are beyond our control, but I promise you that I will do everything in my power to be here for you and your brother and sister and your mama, every single day." "Okay," Thomas whispered. And then, to Grant's surprise, he crawled into his lap and let himself be held until he fell back asleep. Winter came early that year, with snow blanketing the ranch by mid-November. Grant worked tirelessly to ensure the cattle had enough feed, and that the house was properly insulated against the cold. He also worked on smaller projects, like building Sarah a proper desk for her schoolwork and crafting new wooden toys for the twins to replace the ones that had broken over the years. Christmas was a revelation. Joanna explained that last year had been subdued, the shadow of Robert's death too fresh for real celebration. But this year, she wanted to make it special. Grant rode into town and used some of his saved wages to buy small gifts for everyone. For Sarah, a real store-bought book of poetry. For Thomas, a pocket knife like the one Grant carried. For James, a harmonica. And for Joanna, a delicate silver locket that he hoped she would treasure on Christmas morning. The house was filled with squeals of delight as the children opened their presents. Joanna cried happy tears when she opened the locket, and later, in the privacy of their room, she showed him that she had already placed a small photograph inside a picture of all 5 of them taken just last week by a traveling photographer. "My family," she said simply, and Grant had to blink back his own tears. He gave her other gifts that morning too, pulling her into his arms and kissing her with a passion that had only grown stronger with each passing day. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "More than I thought it was possible to love another person." "I love you too," she whispered back. "Thank you for giving me the courage to love again." Spring brought new life to the ranch in more ways than one. The cattle calved successfully, adding to their herd and their income. The land greened up beautifully after the winter snows, and Grant spent long days working the range, often with Sarah riding beside him. She had become quite the horsewoman, and Grant took pride in teaching her everything he knew about ranching. One evening in late April, Joanna called him into the house with an urgency that had him running, fearing something was wrong. Instead, he found her sitting at the kitchen table with a strange expression on her face, somewhere between joy and terror. "What is it? What is wrong?" he asked, kneeling beside her chair. "Nothing is wrong," she said, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "Grant, I am with child, our child." For a moment, Grant could not process the words. Then understanding hit him like a physical blow, stealing his breath and making his eyes sting. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes," she laughed, tears streaming down her face. "I know it is soon, and with everything else we have going on, the timing is not ideal, but I am so happy, Grant. So incredibly happy." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "The timing is perfect. Everything about this is perfect. You have given me so much already, and now this. I do not have words for what I am feeling right now." They told the children that evening at supper. Sarah's face lit up with excitement at the prospect of a new baby brother or sister. The twins had questions, of course, mainly about whether the baby would be able to play with them right away. "Not right away," Joanna explained patiently. Babies are very small and fragile at first. But eventually, yes, you will be able to play together. Will the baby call you Papa? James asked Grant with genuine curiosity. I suppose so, Grant said, the reality of it settling over him like a warm blanket, though the baby will not be able to call me anything for quite a while. That night, lying in bed with Joanna curled against his side, Grant marveled at the turn his life had taken. A year ago, he had been a lonely drifter with no real purpose. Now he was a husband, a father to 3 wonderful children, and soon to be a father in the biological sense as well. It was almost too much happiness to contain. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Joanna suffered from morning sickness that often lasted well into the afternoon. Grant took on more of the household work, learning to cook basic meals and help the children with their evening routines. He discovered he actually enjoyed the domestic aspects of family life, finding satisfaction in the simple tasks that kept the household running. As summer arrived and Joanna's belly began to show, the whole family seemed to revolve around the coming baby. Sarah knitted a blanket with wool from their sheep, her stitches growing more confident with each row. The twins collected smooth stones from the creek to give the baby, because in their logic, all babies needed stone collections. Grant worked on converting a small storage room into a nursery, building a cradle from oak wood and sanding it until it was smooth as silk. Joanna sewed tiny gowns and blankets, her hands never idle during the evening hours. One afternoon in late July, as Grant was working on reinforcing the cradle, Thomas came and sat beside him, watching with the intense concentration only a 7-year-old could muster. "Mr. Grant?" the boy asked after a while. "Yes, son. When the baby comes, will you love it more than us?" "Because it is really yours." Grant set down his tools and pulled Thomas onto his lap, much as he had that night months ago when the boy had the nightmare. "Listen to me carefully, Thomas. You and James and Sarah, you are really mine too. Maybe I did not help bring you into the world, but you are my children in every way that matters. I love you just as much as I will love this baby. There is no difference in my heart." "Promise?" Thomas asked, his voice small. "I promise," Grant said firmly. "And you know what else? You 3 are going to have something this baby will not have. You will have the memories of 2 fathers who loved you. That makes you pretty special." Thomas seemed satisfied with this answer and ran off to play, leaving Grant to contemplate the weight of the promises he had made. He meant every word, but he also knew that actions mattered more than words. He would have to prove his love every day, not just speak it. Joanna went into labor on a crisp September morning, 3 weeks before the baby was due. Grant sent Sarah riding into town to fetch the doctor while he tried to keep calm and help Joanna through the contractions. Mrs. Henderson arrived before the doctor, having been visiting a neighbor nearby, and she took charge with the efficiency of a woman who had birthed 6 children of her own. "You men get out," she ordered, shooing Grant and the worried children from the bedroom. "This is woman's work." Grant paced the kitchen floor for hours, the twins watching him with wide eyes while Sarah tried to read but kept losing her place. Every cry or moan from the bedroom made his heart clench with fear. He had seen men die in war, had witnessed cattle births and accidents and all manner of ranch catastrophes, but nothing had prepared him for the terror of knowing the woman he loved was in pain, and there was nothing he could do to help. Finally, as the sun began to set, a new sound filled the house, the lusty cry of a newborn baby. Grant's knees went weak with relief. A moment later, Mrs. Henderson appeared in the doorway, beaming. "You have a son, Mr. Brennan, a healthy, strong boy. And your wife is doing just fine, tired but fine." Grant stumbled toward the bedroom, the children close on his heels. Joanna lay propped up on pillows, her hair damp with sweat but her face radiant as she held a small bundle wrapped in blankets. "Come meet your son," she said softly, her eyes shining with love as she looked at Grant. He approached carefully, as if the scene might shatter if he moved too quickly. When he looked down at the baby's face, red and wrinkled and absolutely perfect, something fundamental shifted in his soul. This was his child, his blood, a piece of himself and Joanna made manifest. "He is beautiful," Grant whispered, his voice breaking. "He looks like you," Joanna said with a tired smile. "Same nose, same chin. Poor baby." Grant laughed through his tears and carefully sat on the edge of the bed. "What should we name him?" "I was thinking Robert," Joanna said quietly, glancing at the older children who had crowded around to see their new brother. "If that is all right with everyone. Robert Grant Brennan, after both his father and the man who came before." Sarah nodded solemnly. "I think Papa would like that." "Robert it is," Grant agreed, his heart full to bursting. The twins were less interested in names and more interested in when the baby would be big enough to play with, but they peered at their new brother with cautious curiosity before Mrs. Henderson shooed them all out to let Joanna rest. That night, after the doctor had come and gone, pronouncing both mother and child healthy, Grant sat in the rocking chair beside the bed, holding his sleeping son. Joanna was sleeping too, exhausted from the ordeal of birth, and the house was finally quiet. He studied the baby's tiny features, marveling at the miniature fingernails, the wisps of dark hair, the way the little mouth made sucking motions even in sleep. This was his legacy, his continuation. But as he looked toward the room where the other 3 children slept, he knew his legacy was bigger than just blood. It was the family he had chosen and who had chosen him back. The months that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and constant activity. Baby Robert proved to have a healthy set of lungs and opinions about everything from bath time to being put down for sleep. Grant learned to change diapers and warm bottles, to walk the floors at 2 in the morning singing off-key lullabies, to function on fragments of sleep. But he also learned deeper joys. The first time Robert smiled at him, a real smile and not just gas. The way Sarah would sit and hold her baby brother with such tenderness it made Grant's throat tight. How the twins would compete for the chance to fetch things for the baby or help with his care. Joanna thrived in her role as mother of 4, managing the household and the baby with a grace that amazed Grant. They worked together as true partners, supporting each other through the hard moments and celebrating the good ones. One afternoon, when Robert was about 4 months old and finally sleeping in longer stretches, Grant and Joanna managed to steal a few moments alone on the front porch. The older children were doing their chores and the baby was napping, and for the first time in weeks, they had peace and quiet. "I have been thinking," Joanna said, leaning her head on Grant's shoulder, "about how much has changed in just over a year, how different my life is now compared to what I thought it would be." "Different good or different bad?" Grant asked, though he thought he knew the answer. "Different wonderful," she said emphatically. "When Robert died, I thought my life was over. I thought I would just be going through the motions, raising the children alone, trying to survive. I never imagined I could be this happy again, that I could love again and be loved like this." "I feel the same way," Grant admitted. "I spent so many years just existing, not really living. Now every day has purpose and meaning. You and the children, you are my purpose." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun start its descent toward the horizon. Then Joanna said, "There is something else I wanted to talk to you about. The ranch." Grant tensed slightly, wondering if there was a problem he did not know about. "Nothing bad," she assured him quickly. "Actually, I wanted to suggest that we change the name. Right now it is still the Sullivan Ranch, and while I want to honor Robert's memory, it does not feel right anymore. This is our ranch now, yours and mine. What would you think about calling it the Brennan Ranch? Or maybe the Brennan-Sullivan Ranch? Grant considered this carefully. What about just the Double B Ranch? For Brennan and for you, Brennan now but Sullivan before, it honors both the past and the present. Joanna's face lit up. I love that, the Double B Ranch, it is perfect. They made it official the next week, filing papers in town to change the ranch name. It felt symbolic, a way of marking the new chapter they were writing together. Grant also hired a carpenter to make a new sign for the front gate, carved wood that would stand up to the weather, and proclaimed to all who passed that this was the Double B Ranch, established 1866, renewed 1874. As winter approached again, Grant felt a deep satisfaction with how things had turned out. The ranch was thriving, the children were healthy and happy, and his marriage to Joanna grew stronger with each passing day. They had their challenges, of course. Money was sometimes tight, the work was always hard, and raising 4 children was never easy. But they faced everything together, and that made all the difference. On their first anniversary, Grant surprised Joanna with a real celebration. He convinced Mrs. Henderson to watch the children for the evening, and took his wife into Virginia City for dinner at the nicest restaurant in town. They dressed in their best clothes, Grant in his suit and Joanna in a new dress he had secretly commissioned from the seamstress in town. "You look beautiful," he told her as they walked into the restaurant, his hand at the small of her back. "You clean up pretty well yourself, Cowboy," she teased, her eyes dancing with happiness. Over dinner, they talked about everything and nothing, enjoying the rare opportunity to focus solely on each other without the constant demands of children and ranch work. They reminisced about how they met, about the cattle drive that had brought them together, about all the moments big and small that had led to this point. "I never thanked you properly," Joanna said as they shared a slice of apple pie for dessert, "for taking a chance on us. On me and 3 grieving children and a failing ranch. You could have ridden away that first day and found easier work, an easier life." "There is nothing easy about what we have," Grant agreed, "but I would not trade it for anything. You and the children, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. Marrying you was not taking a chance, Joanna. It was the surest bet I ever made." She reached across the table and took his hand. "I love you, Grant Brennan, more than I thought it was possible to love someone. You have given me back my life, my hope, my future. And you have given me a home," Grant said simply. "After years of wandering, you gave me a place to belong." They kissed across the table, not caring who saw or what anyone thought. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling like newlyweds, which in many ways they still were. The ride back to the ranch was peaceful, the night clear and cold, stars blazing overhead like diamonds scattered across black velvet. Grant drove the wagon with one arm around Joanna, pulling her close against the chill. They did not talk much, content just to be together, to soak in the quiet and the closeness. When they arrived home, Mrs. Henderson reported that all the children had been angels, though Grant suspected she was being generous. He paid her for her time and helped her into her own wagon for the ride back to town, then followed Joanna into the house. They checked on each child, starting with the baby who slept peacefully in his cradle, then Sarah, who had fallen asleep with a book still in her hands, and finally the twins who were tangled together in one bed, despite having 2, the way they always seemed to end up. "Our family," Joanna whispered as they stood in the doorway watching the boys sleep. "Our family," Grant echoed, his heart full. In their own room they came together with the passion and tenderness of 2 people who knew how lucky they were to have found each other. Grant worshipped every inch of his wife, showing her with touches and kisses what words could never fully express. She responded with equal fervor, giving herself completely, holding nothing back. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Joanna said something that made Grant's breath catch. "I think we might have made another baby tonight." Grant propped himself up on one elbow to look at her face. "How do you know?" "I do not for certain," she admitted. "But I know my body, and it feels the same way it did when I got pregnant with Robert. And there is something else, call it intuition or hope, but I just have this feeling." "How do you feel about that?" Grant asked carefully. "We already have our hands full with 4. "I know," Joanna said, her hand coming up to cup his face. "And if it is true, life is about to get even more chaotic, but I cannot bring myself to be anything but happy about it. Is that crazy?" "No crazier than anything else we have done," Grant said with a smile. "If we are having another baby, then we will figure it out the same way we figure everything else out. Together." Joanna's intuition proved correct. By Christmas, her pregnancy was confirmed, and by the following summer she was heavy with child again. This pregnancy was harder than the last, with Joanna suffering from back pain and swollen ankles that made working difficult. Grant hired a local girl to help with the housework and watched his wife carefully, ready to call the doctor at the first sign of trouble. Sarah, now 12 and increasingly mature, stepped up to help more with her younger siblings. She minded the baby, helped the twins with their lessons, and generally proved herself to be a capable young woman. Grant was proud of the person she was becoming, kind and responsible, yet still able to find joy in simple things. The twins, now 8, were a handful of energy and mischief, but they were also developing into fine young boys. Thomas showed an aptitude for working with animals, while James had a talent for building and fixing things. Grant made sure to spend individual time with each of them, teaching them ranch skills and life lessons in equal measure. Baby Robert, now nearly 2, was walking and talking and getting into everything. He looked remarkably like Grant, with the same dark hair and blue eyes, and he had a stubborn streak a mile wide that made everyone laugh, even as it drove them crazy. The new baby arrived on a hot August day, and this time the birth was faster and easier than the last. Grant barely had time to fetch the doctor before Joanna was holding their daughter, a tiny thing with a cap of blonde hair and her mother's green eyes. "A girl," Joanna said wonderingly as Grant kissed her forehead. "We have a daughter." "What should we name her?" Grant asked, already in love with this new little person. "I was thinking Grace," Joanna said. "Grace Joanna Brennan." "Because her arrival is a grace, a blessing we did not expect but are so grateful for." "Grace," Grant repeated, testing the name. "It is perfect." The children crowded around to meet their new sister, even Robert toddling over to peer at the baby with curiosity. Sarah held her carefully, natural mothering instincts already showing through. The twins were less interested, having been through this once before, but they were polite enough to make appropriate cooing noises before running off to play. With 5 children now, life at the Double B Ranch was organized chaos. Grant and Joanna had to work hard to make sure everyone got the attention they needed while still managing the ranch and household. They fell into bed exhausted every night but woke each morning grateful for the life they had built. As the years passed, the ranch continued to prosper. Grant proved to be a shrewd businessman as well as a skilled rancher, making deals that expanded their herd and their holdings. By the time Robert was 5 and Grace was 3, they had doubled their land and tripled their cattle, becoming one of the most successful ranches in the territory. But success never changed what mattered most to Grant and Joanna. Family always came first. They made sure to have meals together every day, to mark birthdays and holidays with celebration, to support each other through sickness and struggle. Sarah grew into a beautiful young woman who turned heads when they went into town, but she was in no hurry to marry, preferring to help run the ranch and care for her younger siblings. The twins developed into strong, capable young men who could work a full day alongside any adult. Robert was a charmer with a quick smile and quicker wit, while Grace was quieter but observant, missing nothing that happened around her. Through it all, Grant and Joanna's love only deepened. They still made time for each other, still found ways to laugh and play despite the responsibilities that weighed on them. Grant never stopped marveling at his good fortune, never took for granted the gift he had been given when he rode into Virginia City that day so many years ago. One evening, about 7 years after their marriage, Grant and Joanna sat on the porch watching the sunset. The children were scattered around doing various activities, their voices and laughter providing a familiar soundtrack to the evening. Grace sat on Grant's lap, playing with his pocket watch, while Robert practiced his roping on a fence post. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Joanna asked, her hand finding Grant's. "If you had ridden through town that day without stopping." "If I had turned down your offer to help, I try not to," Grant admitted. "It is too terrifying to imagine. What if I had been too proud to offer help? What if you had been too proud to accept it? We would have missed all of this." "I almost did turn you down," Joanna confessed. "That day when you first offered to help, I nearly said no. I was so determined to do everything myself, to prove I did not need anyone." "What changed your mind?" Grant asked, genuinely curious. "You did," she said simply. "Something in your eyes, in the way you looked at the children. I could see that you genuinely wanted to help, not because you pitied us or because you expected something in return, but because it was the right thing to do. And I thought to myself, this is the kind of man Robert would want helping his family." Grant was quiet for a moment, touched by her words. "I am glad you said yes. To the help, to the marriage, to all of it. You gave me everything I did not know I was looking for." Sarah walked over, interrupting the moment. "Papa Grant, Thomas and James are arguing again about who gets to ride Lightning tomorrow. Can you settle it?" Grant smiled at the name she had started calling him a few years back, a compromise between his actual name and the title of father. He shifted Grace off his lap and stood. "I will take care of it. Come on, Grace, let us go referee your brothers." As he walked away, Joanna called after him, "I love you, Grant Brennan." He turned and grinned. "I love you too, Joanna Brennan, always and forever." The years continued to roll by, bringing changes and constants in equal measure. The children grew, the ranch prospered, and Grant and Joanna grew older together, silver threading through their hair but their love as strong as ever. Sarah eventually did marry, choosing a good man from a neighboring ranch who loved her spirit and strength. Grant walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes, remembering the serious 10-year-old girl he had first met and marveling at the woman she had become. He made sure her new husband understood what a treasure he was getting, and the young man swore to cherish her always. The twins went into partnership with Grant, taking over more and more of the ranch operations as he started to slow down. They were smart and capable, and Grant trusted them completely. Robert announced his intention to study law, wanting to help settlers and ranchers navigate the increasingly complex legal landscape of the West. Grant supported his decision wholeheartedly, proud that his son wanted to use his mind to help people. Grace, his baby girl, developed a passion for horses and a talent for breeding and training them. She turned part of the ranch into a successful horse breeding operation, selling horses throughout Nevada and beyond. Grant loved watching her work, seeing her patience and skill with the animals. Through it all, Through weddings and births and the eventual deaths of Mrs. Henderson and other friends from the early days, Grant and Joanna remained each other's anchor. They had built something lasting, something that would continue long after they were gone. On their 20th anniversary, their children threw them a surprise party. The ranch house was filled with family and friends, multiple grandchildren running around underfoot, and Grant found himself overwhelmed by the sheer abundance of love surrounding him. As the party wound down and the grandchildren were put to bed in various rooms around the house, Grant and Joanna slipped away to their favorite spot, the front porch where they had shared so many conversations over the years. 20 years, Joanna marveled, snuggling into Grant's side. It feels like both forever and no time at all. I know what you mean, Grant said, his arm tightening around her. Sometimes I still see that desperate widow with 3 scared children, trying to be brave enough for all of them. And sometimes I see the woman you are now, confident and strong, surrounded by family and love. And I still see that dusty cowboy who rode into town with nothing but a horse and a good heart, Joanna said softly. The man who offered help without expecting anything in return. The man who loved my children before he loved me. The man who gave me back my life. Grant kissed the top of her head. We gave each other life. That is what love does. It does not diminish either person. It multiplies them, makes them more than they could have been alone. They sat in silence for a while, comfortable and content. Then Joanna said, "Do you have any regrets? Anything you wish had been different?" Grant thought about it seriously. There had been hard times, certainly. Years when the cattle market was bad or when drought threatened the ranch. Times when the children were sick or when money was tight. The ache of watching Sarah leave home, the worry when Robert went away to school. The general wear and tear of life and age on both his body and spirit, but regrets? No, not a single one, he said firmly. Every choice I made led me here, to you, to this family, to this life. How could I regret any of it? Good, Joanna said with satisfaction, because I do not have any regrets either. Even the hard parts, even the pain, it was all worth it to get to this moment. As they sat there watching the stars come out, much like they had on so many nights before, Grant reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He had been a lost man once, scarred by war and drift, believing he did not deserve happiness or peace. Then he had ridden into Virginia City, and found a woman who needed help and children who needed a father and a ranch that needed tending. And in helping them, in choosing to stay when he could have moved on, he had found himself. He had found his purpose, his home, his heart. The cowboy had offered marriage to a widow, and she had said she came with 3 children. Grant had known from that moment that accepting her meant accepting all of them, that he would be father to children who were not his blood, that his life would be complicated and challenging, and so much harder than the solitary existence he had known before. And he had chosen it anyway. Chosen love over loneliness, chosen family over freedom, chosen the messy, beautiful, complicated reality of a ready-made family over the empty simplicity of a life alone. It had been the best choice he ever made. Now, decades later, with children and grandchildren filling his home, with a ranch that bore his name and would continue after he was gone, with a wife who still made his heart race when she smiled at him, Grant knew with absolute certainty that he had lived a good life. Not a perfect life, but a real one, full of love and meaning and purpose. Sarah came out onto the porch, carrying baby Clara, her firstborn daughter. "Papa Grant, Clara wants to say goodnight to her grandpa." Grant took the baby gently, cradling her against his chest. She looked up at him with wide eyes, and he felt the same surge of love he had felt the first time he held Robert, the first time he held Grace, the first time each of his grandchildren had been placed in his arms. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "You are going to grow up on this ranch, did you know that? You are going to ride horses and chase cattle and learn what it means to be part of a family that loves you more than anything in the world." Joanna smiled at the picture they made, her husband and their granddaughter, and felt her heart swell with contentment. This was what they had built together, this legacy of love that would ripple forward through generations. After Sarah took the baby back to bed, Grant and Joanna remained on the porch a while longer, reluctant to let the evening end. Finally, as the night grew cold, they went inside to their room, the house quiet now except for the gentle sounds of sleeping children and grandchildren. As they prepared for bed, moving through the comfortable rituals of 20 years of marriage, Grant caught Joanna's eye in the mirror and smiled. She smiled back, and in that simple exchange was a whole conversation, a reaffirmation of everything they meant to each other. They climbed into bed, and Joanna curled into her customary position with her head on Grant's chest, his arm around her shoulders. It was how they had slept nearly every night for 2 decades, and Grant hoped they would sleep this way for decades more. "Thank you," Joanna whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Grant asked, his fingers absently stroking her hair. "For stopping that day in Virginia City, for offering to help, for staying, for loving us, for all of it." "Thank you for saying yes," Grant replied. "For taking a chance on a drifter cowboy. For letting me into your life and your children's lives. For making me a father, a husband, a man with a home." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other and in gratitude, the steady rhythm of each other's breathing the sweetest lullaby either could imagine. The years ahead would bring more changes, more challenges, more joy and sorrow in the way that life always does. But whatever came, Grant and Joanna would face it together. Their love the constant in a changing world, their family the legacy they would leave behind. And when Grant Brennan, many years later, drew his last breath surrounded by children and grandchildren and the woman who had been his everything for nearly 40 years, his final thought was simple and true. He had lived well, loved completely, and left the world better than he found it. What more could any man ask for? But that end was still far in the future. For now, on this anniversary night, Grant and Joanna slept peacefully in their ranch house, the home they had built together, surrounded by the family they had created, living proof that sometimes the best things in life come when you are brave enough to offer help and humble enough to accept it. The Double B Ranch would stand for generations, a testament to what 2 people can build when they choose love over fear, when they work together toward a common goal, when they remember that family is not just about blood but about commitment and choice and showing up every single day. And it all started with a dusty cowboy riding into Virginia City, a desperate widow hauling water, and a simple offer of help that changed everything.